I'm starting to do the same thing.
Yeah,
But
people come visit and it's like, yeah, it's not the same, but my family's back in Ohio, so anything is better than that. What's up, Alex? All right, so as always, welcome to another MakerPad program session. I know some of you were in the open source session earlier. Today, we've got Will from Forte Education, who's going to be talking about how to run community when it deals with, education and teaching students. And they've, in fact, taught thousands of students. So I'm very curious about some of the strategies that go into that. There's going to be a presentation. So I think if you want to share your screen, we could always kind of
yep,
get that up just to make sure that the tech's all set.
that's good.
And like I said, I'm happy to field questions partway through. I don't know if you want me to jump in if anybody has questions prior, or just through, or we can kind of wait to the end.
Yeah, if something is in the chat, let me know. I can kind of pause after each section and see what's going on. But
awesome.
Can you see that? Does that look good?
Yeah, that's all looking great. So
audio's okay.
Yeah, audio's great as well. He's got a new mic just for just for this. So
just for this.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, why don't we jump in? And I mean, happy to start if you want to chat on your background at all, or if you just want to jump in, that's cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just kick things off. Yeah, so appreciate everybody making some time. Excited to talk about Forte Academy. So I'm Will Mannon. I'm course manager at Forte Academy. And I'm going to talk about how community really powers and drives the learning of our students. So just to touch base a bit on, first of all, what Forte Academy is. Forte Academy is the online education wing of Forte Labs, our company, which is, the short answer is designed to help knowledge workers radically improve their productivity. And we do that through different media and content we create, but also through our online courses. And there are two flagship courses we use in particular. So the first one, Building a Second Brain, is the original course. Has been around for about 4 years. The quick synopsis is it teaches you how to capture, organize, distill information so that you can use it to fuel creative expression. So optimize your productivity to fuel creative expression. The second course we've added more recently in about the past year and a half, Rite of Passage, is sort of more focused on that second step of the creative expression. And it's how do you go ahead and use all this information you've gathered to write and improve your life, your career, and what you're doing. We also have several self-paced courses, but I'm going to focus mostly on the two flagship courses, which are live cohort driven. They're oriented around 5-week live cohorts with Zoom calls and assignments and small groups, which we'll talk about in just a moment. Real briefly, here's the team at Forte Academy. Tiago Forte is the founder. You may have seen him kicking around Twitter. David Perel, you also may have seen on Twitter. He's the founder of Rite of Passage. I'm course manager, and we have a total team of 7, Charlotte, Lauren, Bethany, Becca, all fantastic members of the team. So the learning I'm going to be sharing with you all today is we've run 5 live cohorts in the past 12 months, and we've served in total more than 2,000 students in a single course. Building a Second Brain, we served 1,100 students. Rite of Passage, a bit smaller, roughly 300 students. But the goal for today's session is to take a lot of those lessons we've learned and share them with you all, whether you're watching here on the live call or watching the recording. So really 3 goals I want to talk about. Number 1, I help you guys learn from our mistakes, specifically my mistakes, right? I'm responsible as course manager for the student experience, building the community, and I've made plenty of mistakes. So I want to talk to you guys about those. Also want you all to draw insights from some of the successes that we've had. We've learned from our mistakes and gotten better as the year has gone on. And number 3, I want to leave you guys with some questions to ponder. So I think this is an important point to make about community. Everybody's in a different situation. If you guys are just starting community or if you have one that's been going for a long time, right? I can't give you, everyone on this call, prescriptions for how exactly to build community. I think the best thing you can walk away from this session are excellent questions to ponder using our experience as a mirror to reflect back on whatever your specific situation is. So we'll cover some questions at the end. I hope they're excellent, but we'll find out. But we can take a look at those questions in a bit. So quick agenda, already gave you guys an overview of Forte Academy. There's really these 3 topics I want to talk about: unscalability, selective urgency, and lateral leadership. Those are going to be kind of the 3 touch points throughout the next 45 minutes or so. And then again, we'll end with those questions to ponder. But before we get started, I've got a very important quick question. Does anyone know who this is? Go ahead and put it in the chat. If you do, I'd be really impressed. If you have, it's not a former US president, and I'll explain why. So this is, let's see, a guy named Ralph Waldo Emerson. He's one of my favorite writers, one of my heroes, really. He wrote a book called Self-Reliance, which I strongly recommend. And the reason I bring him up, this is a quote from Self-Reliance. He says, "The power which resides in you is new in nature, and none but you knows what you can do. Nor do you know until you have tried. Not for nothing, one face, one character, one fact makes much impression on you and another none." So the reason I included this is because I think this is what online community in 2020 is all about, right? For all of time, people have had interest, but you mostly have been limited to whoever's in your local area, right? Whoever's in your town, in your city. What's so amazing about this explosion of community and online courses in 2020 is that you can now have an interest and find people from all over the globe with that same interest and orient around certain interests that you have made a strong impression on you, right? Somebody said on Twitter once, you become a lighthouse for like-minded people, and everyone on this call who's building communities is planting your stake in the ground and saying, I've got something I want to organize around. And I just like to focus on that grand vision of what communities are, because once you get lost in the tips and the tricks and the tactics, you can lose sight of how cool this is that we get to do this, that we live in 2020. And I just like to celebrate that. So in that spirit, this is a map of our latest cohort of Building a Second Brain. Again, we had over 1,100 students spanning all across the globe, more than 75 countries, from northern Norway to Madagascar to Papua New Guinea. If you're from New Zealand, I'm sorry, but there were 10 people from New Zealand. You guys just got cut off the map. But anyways, just community in 2020 is pretty darn exciting. So quickly, I want to talk about why we believe in community for our online courses. With traditional education, you have these two forces, the stick and carrot, that keeps people engaged, right? There's a compliance aspect, and then there's a certificate or diploma aspect, right? High school or college, you either have to be there or you've paid a lot of money to be there. So that's that compliance aspect. Being in person, it's kind of awkward to get up and leave in the middle of class. That's another compliance force for traditional schools. And then if you complete your class and you don't fail, you get a diploma, you get a certificate. There's this reward waiting for you at the end. With our online courses, we strip both of those away. Those don't exist, right, for us. There is absolutely no enforcement mechanism we have to make you attend our classes. There's none at all. It's all on your own volition if you want to attend or not. And there's no diploma. We're proudly unaccredited. Our courses are about what you learn, the skills you gain, and that's the value you get. It's not about saying you did something and giving you a certificate. What's interesting about that is then when you're learning and you don't have that carrot and stick driving you forward, it's really easy to stop attending, right? We've seen this, especially earlier in the year. We'd have these cohorts, we'd have 100 people on the first call, and our final call 5 weeks later would have 35, 40 people. It's really a challenge in online education, how to get people to stick with it through the long haul. Seth Godin has a great quote on this. He talks about, in order to become educated, you must first become incompetent. You must first be ignorant, because that's what education is, confronting something that you don't know. And in the face of I don't know, that's scary, and you're about to have to do work, which is also scary. And if there isn't a prize at the end, you say, I don't want to work, I don't want to be afraid, see ya. And we've seen this, right? And he talks about MOOCs and Udemy courses, sort of education 1.0 from last decade, have terrible completion rates, often 10%, even as low as 5%. So this is the challenge we're up against. And we decided earlier this year to make a bet that community and having people get to know each other amidst the course is the way to make our courses sticky, to keep people engaged throughout the entire course. We found this tweet, I think it was back in February or so. A guy, Jeff Weinstein, used to work for Stripe, Patrick Collison, and he had this advice was, solve your number one problem and let the other 99 burn, right? There's so much to fix, but you can get lost in all the details. What's your number one problem? For us, we decided our number one problem was how to create a vibrant course community. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. So how does Forte Academy build community? We bet on these three topics I'm about to talk about: unscalability, selective urgency, and lateral leadership. So kick things off with unscalability. When I first started working on Rite of Passage, actually officially started about 12 months ago, I was working with David Perell, the founder. And one of the first things he told me is, Will, we're going to grow this thing. You have to be ready to scale everything you do. Think about how can this be scaled? How can this be grown quickly? And I imagine a lot of you, if you already have communities or you're starting a new one from scratch, you're thinking about how do I grow? How do I make this thing bigger? And so that was our first assumption, is that we needed to prioritize scale. And so for about a week, everything I did was in this mindset of scale, scale, scale. And then we came across this YouTube video. Yes, it's from 2013. Yes, it only has 4,000 views, but it is a hidden gem. It is phenomenal. It is Patrick Collison, the founder of Stripe, which is now, I think, the Silicon Valley's largest unicorn company. And he's talking about how they grew and scaled in the early days. And he said they actually took the opposite tack. Rather than being obsessed with scale, he said, no, we were deliberately and intentionally unscalable. He said, instead of optimizing for scale, especially in the early days, you optimize for maximizing customer happiness or maximizing user happiness. And he told these stories about what they did in the early days of Stripe. They would write, spend a dozen hours writing custom code for their early customers, totally unscalable. Every single customer service email would go to every single member of the company. And that's not just for the first 6 months, for years. Sort of almost ridiculous. Their first 3,000 customers, they wrote a handwritten thank you note for every single one. So another quick quote, this just got us thinking about all this, right? This is again, Patrick Collison. The idea you need to be scalable, have all this infrastructure to grow is absolutely wrong, right? Listen how forceful he is. It is completely and utterly misguided. For pretty much every feature we've ever built or any aspect of the product, we have been ruthlessly unscalable about it. So if there's any chance you can figure this stuff out down the line, you should be pursuing unscalable strategies that get you to the next level. Note this is particularly important in the first few years. Eventually, obviously, even Stripe has scaled up in plenty of ways, but it's about your mindset coming in the sort of early and medium term when you're starting something new. So we adopted this mindset with full force. One of the things we did is said, we want to meet our students. So the first 2 cohorts of Rite of Passage, we offered to have a 30-minute introductory Zoom call with every single student. Now, not every student took us up on that, but a lot did. I took most of them. David took some of them. Ended up having over 150 of these introductory calls in our first 2 cohorts. And they were simple as, hey, who are you? What are your goals for the course? What questions can we answer? It was before the course started. And we really got to know our students. I think the biggest thing is we demonstrated that we really cared about our students, because who does that, right? There's not many online courses that will take the time to really meet their students to that extent. And we wanted people, the moment they joined our community, to notice that we really cared about them as individuals, what their specific goals were, right? We weren't just running this profit factory, sort of checking some obligatory boxes of how we designed our community. So this screenshot is from a later call. As the cohorts have grown, we've not been able to keep up the one-to-one calls, but with the latest round of Rite of Passage, we did calls of up to 7 people. And for Second Brain, we did even bigger groups because they're big, but still that personal touch of getting to know every single person who walks through our doors is really important to us. And this leads to this idea of this 2 types of online courses. So again, sort of the education 1.0, I would call passive online courses, which are, you probably recognize them. They've got a big, long sales page promising all the things you're going to get. They've got really good SEO and marketing. They've probably got about a 25% refund rate. When you hit purchase, you get a bunch of static PDFs and videos, and you're sort of on your own, go learn. We're deliberately not that. We're deliberately the second type of online course, which is an active online course. Again, we're getting to know our students. We're running 15 live Zoom sessions. We do bonus workshops each weekend. We answer questions, really know our students as people and not just numbers. And another kind of aspect of this unscalability is how we do customer service before and during our courses. We are obsessed with answering quickly, especially right around the time when we were launching our courses. We take great pride in replying under 24 hours, under 1 hour. About 12 months ago, a lady emailed me in the 1 a.m. after it had become daylight savings time. So essentially, I emailed her a response 45 minutes before she emailed me. So I think that's about the best customer service you can deliver. But we really obsess with this, the whole team, something we think about a lot. So to sum up section 1, first takeaway principle is delight your community members unscalably. And think about What can you do with your specific situation that's unscalable and maximize or member happiness? So I'm gonna pause there for a quick drink of water. David, let me know if there's any questions, or I can just keep going.
I think it's great. If anyone has any questions that you want to throw in there, feel free. I really like that distinction between the passive and active courses. I think that active itself kind of communicates the unscalability, that we're not just going to leave you there. We're going to be engaging. And I don't think I've heard that distinction so clearly before.
Nice. Yeah, and it translates well. I mean, obviously everyone on here is not running online schools, but I think the same principle can be applied to any type of community you're running. Are you actively engaged on the forum, all that, or just sort of letting it churn on its own? So, okay. Principle number 2. So this term, strategic urgency. And yeah, to talk about this, I want to, let me see here. Yeah, so I want to, let me just, that's right. So the cohort 3 Facebook group. So rite of passage, first cohort ended last December. The course had gone really, really well. And we had all this energy. We had about 60 students who had been engaged. I said, okay, we need to capture this energy as this online 5-week course winds down. How we're going to do that? I'm going to build a Facebook group. We had a forum at the time on a platform called Discourse. It was pretty clunky. So I said, okay, we'll get everybody on a Facebook group, and all this energy, all this activity will just keep continuing along. It's going to be great. It's just going to stay vibrant indefinitely. And I designed the group. I added all these instructions. I seeded it with all these prompts, added everybody to the group. Week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, just crickets, almost entirely dead. And I was confused. I was like, we had this great thing going for 5 weeks. What happened to all that energy? How did it all dissipate so quickly? And one of the things I realized in hindsight was that we had this urgency around a live cohort with 5 weeks of classes and discussions and assignments. And when that stopped, there was no live element driving that community forward. So I had this assumption that our community would just maintain its equal vibrancy throughout 12 years. This is the second assumption. And that's not necessarily going to be the case. And the way we design our courses right now, we actually deliberately have our courses not be the same amount of, or our community not have the same amount of activity across 12 months. We have these spikes for our live cohorts. So we use live events to create this selective urgency. Now, some people might be trying to design a community where it's just steady 12 months a year. Again, there's different ways to do this, but this is what we do. I think we do this quite well. And so I want to convey this, and hopefully that you guys can draw some insights from this. So a couple different layers of creating selective urgency. Again, first of all, it's just our entire business model. Like I was saying, we just have these certain windows of time during which we have courses. You can see here, I've sort of crudely sketched out the 4 windows that we had our courses this year. We had the writing course, the second brain course, the writing course, and the second brain course, back to back to back to back. And even the way you purchase the course has selective urgency. Our home marketing, we used to have our courses available to purchase at any time. There'd be sort of this steady trickle, but instead we've moved to this model where for about, the default is our courses cannot be purchased throughout the year. About 30 days before the course starts, we start a series of marketing emails, start doing live marketing events on Zoom, start doing more on Twitter. And then about 10 days before the course starts, we open the window to purchase. So you build up all this energy, all this tension, and then you release it with the card opening. So it's open for about 10 days, then you deliver the course for 5 weeks, and it's this intense sprint, and then we wind it way down. And then we do it all again for each iteration. So just the overall structure of how we do things creates that sense of urgency. Then within each live cohort, we also create further selective urgency oriented around this question, which is how can we increase students' surface area of exposure to each other, particularly when the course starts and the energy is highest, right? Because our courses, we have hundreds of people that come together from all over the world, and they're really great people. They're really dynamic and interesting and engaging people. And the question is just, what can we do? What events can we do? What can we do within our live sessions to bring people into contact with each other such that they'll meet each other, establish relationships, and stick around, right? Because the goal here is to get people to stick around in the community. We have this definition of community that we really like, which is a community is a place where if you leave, somebody draws you back in, somebody pulls you back in. And so one of our goals that we've developed over time is that within the first week, we want everybody to meet their first friend. Because you meet that first friend, somebody knows you from a breakout room, which I'll talk about from one of our opening events. They'll notice when you're not there, right? Because again, when you're sitting on your bed and thinking about, should I join tonight's call or not? It's really easy just to close your laptop and go do something else. But when there's somebody who knows you in the course, who's expecting to see you there, you're a lot more likely to keep attending and sort of stay true to the promise you made to yourself when you joined the course in the first place. So a couple of things we do to bring students together. Again, I mentioned that first week is this extra critical window. We've developed something called Initiation Week, which is where we hold all these bonus events on Zoom outside of our normal, say 2 to 3 live sessions per week. So you can see a bunch of different ones here, a couple screenshots, but different events that cater to different people based on geography, based on interest, based on background. We do an event to help you get to know the instructors, Dave and Tiago. A lot of people see them in their public presences, but don't know them. So we have these sessions where you're not allowed to ask anything related to the course material. You can only ask questions about their interest, personal life, interests outside of the course. And those sessions are a lot of fun, turns into this great group discussion. So these have been really pivotal. Again, here's a sort of more condensed list of the different types of events that we do, but you'll see, some are geography based and again, topic based. Some are actually activities like a writing feedback session, a group for women organized by one of our alumni mentors. So this Initiation Week, and it's not just about the events, it's about creating this feeling that when you get into our course, there's almost this overwhelming feeling of energy that greets you. And you're not supposed to do everything. In fact, it's almost not impossible to do everything. We're actually trying to reproduce this Coachella effect, which if you're from Southern California, you know about Coachella because everybody talks about it every spring. And if you're not, you may have heard of it as well. It's this music festival where thousands of people come together, and there's concerts and music, but there's Ferris wheels and crazy, virtual reality experiences and all sorts of different tents you're supposed to go to and food. And it's just sort of this chaotic scene. And you're not supposed to do everything, but when you walk in the door, you're greeted with this overwhelming sense of, whoa, something big is happening here. I'm part of it, and I want to go get engaged and find my event, find my people, such that you'll stick around. So that's sort of the second way we create this selective urgency. And then zooming in even further, we do this at the level of the individual live sessions. So when you join our live sessions, you will be placed, at first we're sort of doing a lecture conversation similar to this, and then every class, it's a 90-minute class, and we have 2 different times where Zoom will whisk you away into a group of 3 random people, and you'll have a prompt, and it'll just be the 3 of you talking in this group. And it's really good for, number one, waking people up, right? It's not just this passive experience of receiving this information transmission of the course. You're actually sprung awake, and you got to say something to some people who might be 8,000 miles away from where you're sitting. And it creates this urgency of meeting others, right? So here's a couple of screenshots from some of our breakout rooms. You can see you are just instantly brought together with other people. When I was a student in Forte Academy courses, before I started working with them, I made some really good friends in breakout rooms, right? I have a couple of friends from breakout rooms who I still keep up with and talk to like I would a friend from college who I've never even met in person, but we just hit it off in these rooms. So this is a really powerful tool for bringing people together and creating that sense of urgency. And yes, the bottom right is a special breakout room where my parents actually joined. Took about 10 minutes to figure out the tech of Zoom and get themselves off mute, but they were able to participate, which was pretty cool. Now, the third item I want to talk about is once you've created all this urgency, how do you harness that energy, right? It can't all happen on live events. Live events is sort of what is the catalyst, but then you have to catch that energy somewhere. And for us, that happens on the course forum, right? So any community forum you guys might be making would be similar. And I don't want to talk about tools too much. It sounds like you've had other segments in the MakerPad community program that is talking about tools, but I will just share some screenshots briefly of how our course forum experience has grown over time. This is sort of version 1.0. It's an old clunky platform called Discourse. Some people like it, but it's not very intuitive to use. And so you can see it's just a bit older, and we used this for a while. Then we took a bet on this new platform called Circle in January. They've since just had explosive growth, but early on, Circle didn't look that good. They had a lot of bugs. They were missing a ton of features. Visually, you can see It just really wasn't there. But there's one thing in particular I loved about Circle, is the reason I advocated for using it. It's a really nice balance between the ephemerality of Slack, but then the permanence of a clunky forum like Discourse, right? Because you want to have spontaneous conversation. You want people having conversation on these forums day to day. So you want that ephemerality aspect. But my problem with Slack is that all that just disappears, right? It's here one moment, gone the next. There's no permanence. And so what's great about Circle is you can see as it has grown, we have these different public channels, we have these small groups, we have interest groups, which we'll talk about in a moment, and the community can really grow there and thrive. But then there's also this record and sort of, lessons that new people can go back and look at old conversations. So it's been fantastic for us. And here's the Second Brain Circle community. You can see just popping with activity every day. There's, especially during the live session, during the live cohorts, there's tons of activity on the forum. And you can see how some of our daily active member numbers have really spiked as the community has gotten stronger and as the course forum experience has gotten stronger. So to wrap up, the second principle is talking about the selective urgency and how that fuels increased exposure surface area among members, how that helps people form first friendships, and how that will then lead to increased forum activity, which is where you harness the energy of your community. So even if you're not building a online course, think about how can you use live events, could be weekend workshops, could be Zoom calls, could be interviews. How can you use that to get people engaged with each other and then harness that energy in an asynchronous forum? So David, I'll pause there too.
Yeah, I think
that
the interesting thing about this like urgency aspect or the energy you're talking about is I think that if you give someone a choice, like yes, no, here's a live event, are you going to go? Yes or no? You're in the live event. Who wants to ask a question or speak? Yes, no. Like I think all those decision points, they're sort of what creates the energy, because there's the tension aspect. And that's another Seth Godin thing, is you've created this tension and someone needs to break the tension by, following through. And so anyways, to me, I thought that was really interesting, is that I think the live aspect is necessary because it forces you to decide, am I going to attend this or not? We have a quick question from Alex Brown, who's raised his hand. So let me see if I can bring him up real quick to ask a question.
Great.
All right, Alex.
Awesome. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yep.
Sweet. Well, thanks. This has been awesome so far, Will. Really, really appreciate it. The question I was hoping you could speak to a little bit more is, and maybe this is a little too in the weeds, but if you could speak a little more to what makes like a powerful Zoom event or live kind of session over Zoom. We do those at my company, and I don't know, I kind of go back and forth, because on the one hand, doing like a webinar kind of like this is great for certain things and for scaling, like we've talked about, but also limits kind of the interactions that people can have. And so I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to some of the learnings you guys have had around the best way to make these events really powerful, really energizing, successful.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
we think about that a ton. How do you make these live sessions dynamic? If people are going to spend their valuable time on these calls, you want them to be as engaging, as interesting as possible. So we have a list of 7 different tactics you can use to make live sessions dynamic. I'll list a few of them off the top of my head right here. But obviously breakout rooms are number one. It's really critical to get people talking. Again, we have a rule. We don't want to go more than 25 minutes without getting people into a breakout room or into some kind of group discussion. Another one you can do is a group discussion in front of the large group. So we'll typically do a breakout room for 10 or 15 minutes. Then everybody comes back and we'll say, okay, hey, who are 2-3 people who want to share in front of the group? And that's a big moment for people. When we'll have 200-300 people on a Zoom call, sometimes more, and they're going to speak in front of that entire group. You really remember that moment, and it kind of brings up and surfaces things that wouldn't otherwise come up. Other things quickly, there's a polling feature from Zoom with Second Brain. Tiago likes to do a poll at the top of every class. You can use the chat. So we'll often say, okay, hey, think about this 5-minute prompt, do a little bit of writing on your own, and then everybody put your answers in the chat. And that Zoom chat is so valuable. We do our Zoom calls this is currently in webinar mode, so we can't see everyone's face. I really like the meeting mode because you can see everyone. It's this gallery view, and the chat is real active. You say, okay, hey, everybody on the call, what do you think about XYZ? Put your answer in the chat. And when you have a couple hundred people on a Zoom call, you get this flood of responses. It's just the most overwhelming thing, 150 responses in 30 seconds. And that chat creates this dynamic feeling. The whole time we're running our live calls, there's a secondary conversation call happening on the chat. So those are few. That's like 4 of them. And I think there's a couple other things we do, but just anytime you can get the group engaged and involved in the call, I think is really important. So yeah, we keep that in mind a lot.
Thanks. That's awesome.
Yep.
Thanks, Alex.
Okay. So then transitioning from thinking about creating that sense of urgency to this third piece, I want to talk about, you have all these great community members. How do you tap into that source of all the people in your group to really drive the group, so it's not all on your shoulders? Otherwise, it's a big burden to carry. So I want to talk about this idea of lateral leadership, and I want to kick this session off with another story. So when I was, again, starting out early on, we knew we wanted to break these large cohorts of 150, 200, or 800 people into smaller groups. We said, okay, well, I, as the community manager, am going to go ahead and design these small groups, engineer them just so they're just perfect, and everyone will go into these small groups and make friends and get to know each other, and it'll just be fantastic. And so that's exactly what I did. You can see this is from one of our early cohorts of rite of passage. I went ahead and divided the entire student roster into this big list, divided everybody up, picked certain leaders, tried to move people around based on who I knew, who I thought would be compatible. I was engineering this entire thing from the top. And then one day we said, hey guys, we've placed you in these groups. This is where you'll be sharing feedback. This is where you'll be getting to know other people, making friends. And we promptly had crickets, right? These groups were on the forum. You can see some of our different attempts to get people to respond, get people to post their assignments. And it was often just dead silent. It was very frustrating, right? It was like, why? We have all these great people. We want to increase the surface area of exposure. So we're putting them in these groups where they can get to know each other, become friends. And it just wasn't working. We had these alumni mentors earlier back in February for our writing course, who their entire role was to be mentors on the forum. And they had these groups, and we had all these different prompts they could post on the forum to gin up activity. They had people, ask people to post a picture of themselves, ask people to answer different questions in a prompt. And every Friday we'd get together on these calls, and they were great people. They tried so hard, but we'd get together on these Fridays calls, and it's kind of sad. They would just be like, I'm trying. It's kind of a ghost town in my group. People aren't really responding. A few groups had more activity, but a lot of groups just weren't where we wanted to be. And what was revealed is that we were making a third faulty assumption about how to design communities. And it was that, it's my responsibility, it's our responsibility to design and deliver the perfect community experience for our members. All right, I was trying to engineer these groups, these alumni mentor groups. And over the summer, when we were kind of between the different cohorts, did a lot of thinking about this. When we're implementing new things in our course, we kind of borrow the Amazon model and write these long memos. So I write up this big Google Doc about, okay, how can we make community stronger by making small groups that are dynamic, that people want to be a part of, that don't feel forced. And we hit a tipping point, which was flipping the groups from opt out to opt in. So what I was doing before was taking this mass of the student body and breaking into these arbitrary groups. Now I try to design them based on location or who I thought would get along, but that's just me, one person, sort of trying to plan the entire thing, this top-down approach. And it really didn't work. So instead, we put out applications for our writing course. We said, okay, hey, we're going to look for 7 of our past alumni who are rock solid. They're great writers, they're consistent writers, and they're good leaders. We put out applications. We picked 7 excellent people. And we had every single person record a 2-minute video explaining who they were, their interests, their backgrounds, and what their group was going to be focused on. And we gave them their own hour-long sessions each week where they had the autonomy to design the groups as they felt best fit. And, they could run those sessions as needed. I'm from DC, kind of big politics guy. It's gonna be a lot of fun tonight, but I always think about this concept of federalism, right? You have the federal government in the US, and then a lot of the autonomy is pushed down to the state level, where there are these little incubators of experiments, try different policy. That's sort of the model we applied here, right? These different mentor groups could try different things out. And every Friday we get together on the calls, and instead of, griping about the fact that nobody was being active, suddenly these groups were extremely vibrant. People were joining, and the mentors were providing a much more personalized course experience. People were getting to know each other. We found people start to identify with their groups. Oh, I'm in Lev's group. I'm part of Jackie's group. And the mentors could learn so much from these groups and bring that information back to us. And so I really think there's this mental flip when you shift the agency to the individual members of the community and say, hey, you go choose where you want to be. You go kind of help design this thing on your own. And there's a much stronger sense of identity than just placing people in arbitrary groups. So this is an example from the Second Brain course, obviously a lot bigger. So we had 20 alumni mentors. You can see we divide them out across all different time zones. We had sessions 7 days a week. It just had incredible attendance. We had, some of these sessions had up to 200 people, 40, 50, 60 people joining these sessions. We did one session per week for the 5-week cohort. And same type of effect we saw. We could divide these groups up. You can see on that Notion page, some people were focused on a certain tool. Some people were in a certain time zone. Some people had a certain background. Like I see Monica here is a professor. So she would focus, a lot of academics would be drawn to her courses. Ramsey's next to her. He's a real expert on this tool, Rome Research. So some of our more advanced Second Brain students would join Ramsey's group. Let's see who else. Lindsay Hinari, she's been one of our students from day one. She is really good at, she's not naturally as predisposed to being tech savvy. So she's really good at people who are beginners and helping them through. So dividing this up and letting people self-sort was really powerful. Then again, these Friday calls, it was the best hour of my week because we would get together. This is again, the writing mentors. We get together and learn so much from them. They're collecting way more qualitative data than I could ever collect or David could ever collect. And so breaking people into smaller groups and giving them the agency to choose their groups benefits from the student side, and you can also learn so much more. This is a lot of the purpose why we do these groups, but think about these items from your own lens, right? How can you create a sense of accountability in your community such that people keep returning to it? I think anytime people can be sharing their true and vulnerable selves, it's not easy to find other people online where you have that sense of trust to do that, but you can create that dynamic through these small groups. You have this trust with a leader in a small group, and helps capture that, urgency we created, and also helps fuel the creativity of students in the course. One more aspect of a bottom-up community I'll touch on, then we'll take another pause. See, we have some, actually, David, is there a question now? Maybe we can pause real briefly.
Yeah, question real quick on the mentors from BJ is, do you pay your mentors for the 5 weeks? And if so, how much?
Good question. We didn't pay the first round of mentors who were just sort of helping out on the forum a couple of weeks, but we decided to pay the mentors who were doing that active role. We paid each of them for both courses $1,000. And, the time commitment was, the official time commitment was not that high. So it was pretty good for the number of hours you were spending, but a lot of the mentors give so much because they're so excited to be a part of this that, they're not really doing it for the money, right? For the most part, it's about the connections and kind of being a leader in the community. We'll probably start paying even more as everything sort of gets elevated and formalized going into next year. But right now it's $1,000.
Yeah, there's a follow-up, which is how do you keep them engaged if it's pro bono? But it sounds like it's partly just interest, fun, connection, like they're engaged because they want to be.
Yeah, totally. It's the thing about the mentors, like every single one of these people, like I knew just about all of them personally. And certainly between myself, Dave, and Tiago, we knew all of them personally, right? We really know these people. Like they're at a minimum, like whatever you call like a very strong acquaintance, or if not a friend when they start, they're certainly friends by the end of the program. And so it does have such a, using this word a lot, but communal feel. You really know these people already. And so you know that they're going to be, for the most part, great people who want to be there, who are selfless and giving. Now we have had, we had a situation where one of our earlier cohorts in April, somebody just wasn't up to standard, good person who was just really overcommitted, had too much going on. And we actually let them go about 3 weeks in. So that can happen. You got to have high standards, right? It's very friendly. It's very communal, but it's also professional, right? These courses are not cheap and we're not messing around here. We're friendly, we're fun, but you gotta bring it. And so we have certain expectations, but otherwise people just really want to give a lot, which is great.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So one other to kind of close out, like to keep the structure in mind, right? So we've talked about unscalability, talked about creating that sense of urgency. And then the second half of the third aspect I want to talk about here is another type of bottom-up community. So lateral leadership, not just from your sort of upper level of mentors, but ways we've created leadership for even more people in the community. So part of our course forum, one of the sections of the Circle forum is called interest groups. This is the only section of the forum where any student can actually go and create what's called a space, which is, a small section of the forum. So it's the only section you have free reign to go create your own spaces, and you can create a space around any topic under the sun. We give a couple guiding principles, a couple examples. And this was an experiment the first time we did it. I just thought, as the bottom up thing was really working for the alumni mentors. And I was like, there's got to be a way to give even more members of the community more agency to self-organize around what they're interested in, right? To further increase the surface area of exposure among members. So as an experiment, we opened these interest groups, and I'm going to show you the rite of passage interest groups, then the second brain interest groups, and you'll just see the explosion of interest that burst forth when we opened this section of the forum. Just, I think about 70 or 80 groups in the rite of passage forum. You can just see all sorts of different topics, people organizing by geography, organizing by technology, organizing by profession, organizing by interest. This metaverse one I highlighted in particular, it's kind of fascinating with COVID and all. It's this group of people who are fascinated in sort of the digital universe that is emerging and growing, particularly since COVID, right? The virtual Burning Man, somebody went to that and did a big write-up on how that went. Concerts in Fortnite, just this whole new dimension of human interaction that's emerging. And there's a really lively conversation in that group. So it's been really cool to see that. And then you'll see even expanded list for Second Brain, just all sorts of different groups that people have created. So we're proud of these groups, right? There's a ton of activity. I'm not familiar with all the activity in all these groups, and that's the way it should be, right? As community manager, as course manager, I shouldn't know everything that's happening in all the groups. There should be way more activity. So I'm just overwhelmed, and I just know good things are happening without having to know the specifics in each group. So these have been really exciting. And I will say, I think that there's tremendous potential for these, and we'll talk a bit more about where I think this is going to grow in the future, but I think interest groups are one of the most important aspects of our courses going forward. I want to level these up next year where there's sort of a more formal process where if your group meets a certain threshold, we will make the group founder what we call a moderator, so kind of below that alumni mentor role, but still somebody who's a leader, somebody who can organize their own Zoom calls, somebody who can kind of make these groups more official. And there's this really funny thing that happens when you, as running a community, you give other people the chance to step up and be leaders. Don't underestimate, that can be a really big moment for people. It might be the first, event or somebody has run or organized in months or years, right? And it's that person's taking a risk within the context of your community. And if they run a great event, that risk pays off. They feel really good. There's these incredible positive externalities that stem from giving people these leadership positions. And those positive externalities are directly associated with your community. So the more you can equip people and elevate people and say, hey, you go off and do something great, it benefits the group, but don't sleep on the fact that it really benefits those individuals in particular as well. And then
got a quick question I was going to say here that is, how do you moderate the content? Tons of groups, lots happening.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, a lot of it, we want to just let them run and go wild. If there's something that's inappropriate, something like that, there's a function within Circle where you can flag a comment to be moderated. If somebody's spamming a group, obviously somebody says something that you don't want said in your community. I think we've only had like 3 flagged messages since we started, but yeah. And a lot, there's, I'm not going to pretend that all these groups are, just hundreds of messages per day, right? There's different levels of engagement with these groups. But again, this is sort of the version 1.0 of bottom-up self-organization. But I'm trying to see, 2, 3, 4 years out, I think there's huge potential from these groups. So.
Awesome.
And from these groups, what we've seen is a lot of these groups will sort of level up on their own. Sometimes they don't even need us to equip them with things like Zoom links or whatnot. So on the next slide, I'm going to share just a couple brief examples of where people have just gone ahead and run with things. You'll see one of our students, Adam, when Rite of Passage ended, we do this thing on every Saturday called CrossFit for Writing. He kept organizing that, and they are still going to this day. And that course ended in March. Every Saturday, there's 10 or 12 people who get together and write in this intense CrossFit environment for 2 hours. I won't go into all of these, but you see this writing accountability, daily accountability writing groups, the BASB women's group. Maria has run that and just been a really strong group. Again, that's still meeting. I think they meet every 2 weeks at this point. And then we have another course called Annual Review, which is 2 days in January, kind of set your year right. And a group of students from that have organized a monthly meetup to help keep the group on track with their goals. I just attended the November session. It's still alive and well, first Sunday of every month. So really cool stuff. Just watching people, watching the community flourish from the bottom up direction. So third principle to leave you with is don't over-engineer from the top. Equip lateral leaders to drive bottom up community. David, anything else on that front?
I think, I'm just blown away by how much of a true community this education, course has become. I mean, with all the interest groups, you've really expanded the boundary of how you think about, what a course community looks like. And I think, that's something we can maybe chat about a little bit at the end. I know you've got some questions to kind of leave us with, but I think most people, when they're doing, especially the passive type course, they think everybody should just pop in, get what they need in this very narrow set of topics. And we haven't even talked about how the course content has fit into this. And I think that's what's so amazing is I also really like the Coachella kind of aspect. I think that also points to creating energy, creating fun, and letting people connect on other levels other than the content, which probably is what drives the cohesion and the retention. And so, it really becomes more of something that you're buying into, almost like a brand is how I kind of see it, where it's expanding out. So it's not about the specific product or the specific course. It's like this bigger mindset that you affiliate with. And I see why you're excited, because I think that actually has a much wider boundary than most people will think. And I think it seems like you're one of the first groups really proving that that's true.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it, right? It's you need that. It's funny, I haven't mentioned the curriculum much at all. The separate session. You actually need that substance. You need some there to orient around. But that's just, what's an analogy? I guess you'd be like, that. But the atom, there's like the nucleus. Like you need that in the center, but really the action's like in that swirl of stuff around that nucleus, right? And just connecting with people on a human level. Like it's fun. Again, people don't join our courses by accident. Again, like you have to be in typically a certain sphere of the internet to even know they exist. And then beyond that, we're not selling something for $50 or $100, right? This is a real investment to join our courses. But given that, you get a really high quality group of people together. And then David, like you're saying, they can just engage on so much more than just the course material. So it's really fun, frankly. It's a whole new way to interact with other people. It's we're pretty excited about it.
It's also, to this point, you're empowering other people to sort of take the reins and develop within the structure that you've created. So at the beginning you mentioned planting your flag and that being this exciting thing at the high level of community, and that to me is what it sounds like. That's what the course is hey, this is why this is for people like us. If you're interested in this course, join this group, and then as you join the group, you have all these other common shared interests. So it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, why don't we jump to the questions? And then we can open it up for any other Q&A. I know you get some, unless you don't want to leave us at the very end with those questions. Up to you.
Let me see. I will is there like a question I can take right now? And then maybe I've got a couple more slides.
Sure. Yeah. Anyone else have a question they want to ask Will about kind of the community they've built? I'm a little curious about whether Circle feels like the long haul for you. I know that's another like tool conversation, but I've seen it like really growing. And I'm curious like how that evolves. But let's jump to this question here. Tom asks, what are some things you plan on implementing for the next cohorts?
Yeah, actually, that's one of the slides that are coming up. So I'll just maybe just
move forward.
Ahead, yeah.
Cool.
Cool. So, yeah, it's actually the very next slide. So, future frontiers, kind of places where we are looking to grow in the future. What's so fun about this stuff, and you probably tell, you guys are all interested in community building too. You guys are in this MakerPad program. There's no absolute answers here because this is all brand new. And we felt like that before COVID, but we especially felt like that since COVID, where so much more attention is on this area. And we really do feel like we're playing our small little role in helping drive the frontier forward. So there's no, person who has a PhD or has been doing this for 35 years who can come and tell us we're doing it wrong. It's like, who else but us and everybody else, our peer group, to drive this forward. So some of the areas we see as our frontier is, I mentioned, first of all, expanding that decentralized community. You can call them micro communities, but those interest groups, I really do think plays an absolutely central role in what we're going to be doing. There's these 3 layers of course community. I can, let me quickly see if I can just do this off the cuff, but basically it's, as you grow bigger, and say with Tiago and Second Brain is getting bigger, well, actually really both the courses, the actually absolute outside layer is completely outside of your control, where you have no responsibility over that layer of content. It would be like a user generated Reddit thread where the people, or Reddit community, right, where the people may or may not have taken your courses. It could be some forum or something where they're just chatting about your stuff, and you have really no responsibility at that. And then there's the middle layer. We have an analogy here, but anyways, that middle layer are, what do they call it? Like just single events that you do. So you do we do these marketing events in a couple of weeks before our course starts. So we'll go out to David and Tiago's public email list and Twitter and say, hey, we've got Second Brain Week. We've got these 8 calls over the next 2 weeks. They're all completely free. You can join, get a little taste of our course, see what we're all about, right? And so that's that second ring of community. And then the inner ring is the walled garden, where you have absolute responsibility, right? You are completely responsible for what's going on there. People have paid money to be a part of that. So again, these 3 rings with different layers of responsibility at each ring, if that makes sense. So just saying all that is, how do you expand those layers and kind of focus on each layer in a different way going forward? Anyways, another thing we really realized is you want to celebrate positive behavior in the community, right? You want to draw people's attention to what other community members are doing well that drives things forward, that, they're having success stories. So we created these sections of the forum called course wins, and we'd have dozens of posts in there, and each live call, we'd celebrate 1 or 2 course wins. Somebody's like, hey, I posted my first blog post, and 6 people texted me and said they love my blog post. And I've been wanting to write and haven't written anything for 5 years. We're going to celebrate that on our live call. You can go to this section of the forum and see that, and same thing with Second Brain. We have a lot of course wins. Conversely, we're very deliberate about not having people overly focus on the negative. So this is actually a huge learning point. We used to do very public feedback where we'd have a feedback space on Circle. And our whole thing was like, look, we're an open book. Tell us what you think about our community. We can take it. And I think in the early days, it's almost a defense mechanism. Like, we know we're not perfect, but we're willing to hear what you guys got. But as our courses get better, we realize we don't want to have people overly focused on what's not perfect about the experience. And so we still take feedback, but we take feedback in private and we celebrate publicly. Quickly moving through these other ones. We used to do live city meetups before, I led the Los Angeles group. It was excellent. So whenever we'll get those going again. We can do more working, like weekend workshops outside of our courses. So we get really good at these 5-week spikes of energy. There's a natural decline, but like, what can we do to keep that energy going between the 5-week events? Even more one-on-one conversations. How do we bring more people together? We've tossed around this idea of intellectual speed dating, but just these funny ideas to bring more people together. Using new video platforms, really cool stuff coming down the line. There's this app, there's Rally, there's these different video apps we're hearing about. So excited to see those reach maturity and doing stuff in different languages. We had a Spanish group, but gosh, we do French, Hindi, Chinese. There's so many different possibilities. there. Oh yeah, this is that the 3 layers, right? Open houses and walled garden are those 3 layers. So you can just read that. I've got the final questions in the next slide, David, but if there's anything else in the meantime, maybe take 1 or 2 more and then can sort of end with that.
Perfect. Yeah. Anybody else have a question for Will? Throw it in now before we get to these final questions. One thing that's really struck me just while waiting, if anyone has anything they want to share, was I think another thing you've done that's very different from most things I see is the quantity of live content and also in-person type events. I mean, I'm just amazed at the amount of, continual calls that are happening. And I think that to me is very different than whatever we want to call like the previous generation of like community and courses. Maybe that is the passive kind of idea. But yeah, truly a lot of live conversation, in-person time. And I find that to be amazing. Got another question here for BJ. How do you find an awesome community manager for your community? Do you post to LinkedIn or?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can briefly share my story. I mean, I was a student. I had followed David and Tiago on Twitter. I liked what they're all about. I thought they were really had done some interesting stuff. So I signed up for Rite of Passage, signed up for Second Brain, and I just kept showing up. And you'll find there's certain members of your community that just show up. It's sort of, it happens naturally, right? It's not like something that's forced. And as they show up, they sort of stand out. And I kind of approached them and said I had a few ideas, and they offered to bring me on part-time, then full-time. So that's my experience. Now, if you're starting from scratch, you don't have this existing community where people will stand out, different things you can do. I mean, I think this concept is becoming more common in community managers. So like a job posting, I think would be less jarring of a community manager now than 12 months ago. There's a guy named Gagan Biani. Funny enough, he actually founded Udemy, very education 1.0. He's now founded another company where he's trying to they're becoming a platform for launching online courses. And he had I think it was like a blog post for, I'm looking for a community manager. He tweeted it. So if you search like Gagan, Gaganbiani, like community manager, you might find that posting. He hired a guy named Landon, who I then had a call with, who's great. So you can even message, but anyways, if you want to message me and get in touch with that guy, but yeah, so that was a good job posting too. Maybe you could use that strategy.
Awesome. Got another question. If you were to focus on one thing when starting out a new community, what would you focus on?
We have this term in Rite of Passage called your personal monopoly, which is what are your unique combinations of ideas, skills, talents, and interests, right? Sort of what's your personal Venn diagram of interest. And like I said, it's great to bring a lot of people together, and this whole idea of community is really fun and it's really sexy right now, but you need some there, right? Like what's your nucleus? What is your thing that you're most excited about that other people are going to want to orient around? And so I think you have to know that, and it has to be very true. Like I think if you're trying to start a community for utilitarian sake, it's not going to be very effective. It's got to be something you love. It could also be utilitarian, but it's got to be something you genuinely love. And I think once you have that and then you start creating content, it's really important. Writing, podcast, YouTube, whatever around that, it'll just emerge over time. There's a lady on Twitter, Anne-Laure Lecumpf. She's got about 35,000 followers. She's built a vibrant community just around writing. And if you write enough quality content, people will gravitate towards you. And eventually I think the community will just emerge. So don't force it and make it something you love.
Awesome. Any other last questions for Will before you jump into these questions to consider, some things to ponder over the week ahead? Why don't we, I was going to say, just wait a second here. Yeah, why don't we jump forward?
Okay. There it is. Okay. So 5 questions for you to think about, but kind of mapping to the way the presentation went today. First of all, how can I maximize members' happiness in unscalable ways? Really make them feel that personal connection. Ask yourself, how can I create urgency in my community? And then harness that energy that comes from the urgency. What is my balance between top-down design versus bottom-up? I think most time you want to nudge more towards that bottom-up. Often doesn't come as naturally. Where are my opportunities for lateral leadership within my community, elevate others, get those positive externalities? The fifth question is, what positive behaviors within my community can I celebrate publicly? So again, don't want to prescribe a one-size-fits-all solution that doesn't exist, but use this as a mirror. Use what we do as a mirror to reflect back to your community. It's my suggestion, and see how you can improve in these different areas, or think about these different areas. And just to land the plane here, I'm going to come back to our guy Ralph Waldo Emerson real briefly. Again, Emerson, I think, was one of the most brilliant thinkers that I've ever come across. He lived in the 19th century, and as a result, he had these brilliant ideas, but he was stuck doing lectures to town halls of 500 people. He was poor into his 70s, even he had the greatest ideas. Thankfully, we don't live in the 19th century. We live in the 21st century. So if you have wonderful ideas, again, you have that personal monopoly, you can build massive communities around the world. You can nudge your thumb and your ideas circle the globe 7 times in a second. And we're just so lucky to have this opportunity to build great communities. So I think we just need to not forget that and be thankful for what we have, and just build great stuff and meet great people. So with that, David, everybody, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for that energetic. And I also love, ending on questions that you can ponder and consider, because it's really about that ongoing kind of posture. Like you said, you're still exploring what that frontier is, but you have these different lenses now that you're looking through, and that can translate to all different types of ideas that you test. I also appreciate that you shared some things that you tested out that didn't work, that you learned from, and I think that's a great lesson and way to share as well. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your insight, taking the time. Excellent presentation.
Of course.
And if you wanted to share, I think people generally know where to find all the course content and stuff. If you want to share anything about that in your own Twitter, et cetera, feel free to share about that now.
Yeah, I can just drop a couple links.
Yeah, drop some links in there. Perfect. Yeah, so highly recommend. Check out Will on Twitter. On the personal site, Forte Labs classes.
Yeah. Amazing. Yep. Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Looks like the connection cut out there for a second, but yeah, thanks so much, everybody. I hope the rest of your day goes well, considering the interesting day, at least here in the US, that's going on. And we'll catch you for the next one. Thanks so much, Will.
Bye-bye, guys.
All right. Yep. See ya.